I know that it's afternoon, and I know a lot of us are tired from the day's sessions, but we'll get through this because we have three important stakeholders that will be joining us on stage. The topic will be on strengthening startup ecosystem, global lessons from Africa. And our ecosystem in Africa, I mean, we've grown over the years from, and I just want to mention that I would not just focus on startup ecosystem, I will also focus on SMME ecosystem. So I will look at it generically from an entrepreneurship ecosystem. So over the years, I mean, if you look at 10 years ago, where we were raising $1 billion every year, our startups raising $1 billion every year, today we're sitting on around $5.2 billion that startups are raising every year on the continent. We have a youth population, 400 million. It's predicted that by 2050 we'll be 800 million. Then we come to our challenges. We have challenges of infrastructure. We have challenges of including connectivity. We have challenges of access to capital. We have challenges of skills and so on the continent. But within all this, what we've done is that we've also created a vibrant youth ecosystem that are going beyond these challenges to be able to do business and succeed. Currently, we have close to a dozen unicorns on the continent. And these unicorns, I think majority of them came up in the last 10 years. We have an informal sector that is also mostly in the sub-Saharan continent also. Informal sector that are creating most of the jobs that we have on the continent. So this is just painting a holistic picture of the ecosystem that we currently have on the continent. And to join me now to discuss some of this, I will call upon Robert Kuhn, the MD Amazon, Sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you, Robert. And I will call Kennedy Bungani, CEO African Bank. Kennedy, you can sit at the end. And then the minister was at the wrong venue. He was behind the stage, so he's coming right now. In absentia will be Senator John Eno from Nigeria. Rob, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you, Kazita.
Good to see you in US, right? From South Africa.
Yeah.
Tell me, Amazon, you just launched recently, right? In South Africa. Looking at, what is your feeling about South Africa's ecosystem and the rest of the continent's ecosystem? How do you see it in a generic point of view?
I think, look, first off, Amazon has had a presence in South Africa for actually 20 years. What few people know is that when AWS, our cloud business, was just a twinkle in the eye, one of the guys in that team was a South African, and he said, hey, I'll help build this, but I'm going to build it in Cape Town. And so that's led to a long legacy. It actually started in a garage in Cape Town, and it's grown to something a lot bigger. So today, Amazon in South Africa is over 6,000 people, which includes the cloud business. So EC2 was the component that they actually built in Cape Town, and they still do a lot of the EC2 development down in Cape Town. And then we have a big customer support center down there. But the latest sort of step in our journey has been launching the retail business. So we've never had an actual store, an online store in South Africa. But in May of last year, we released Amazon.co.za. This is the 23rd store that we've released worldwide. And I think our big interest is, more than 60% of the units that are sold in Amazon worldwide are actually sold by other businesses in our marketplace. And having lived in the US, I'm originally South African, so it was a real exciting journey to get back to South Africa to lead this. But in my time in the US with Amazon, there are so many great stories of entrepreneurs who've built businesses within the marketplace. These are people who've, I mean, in some cases of who I've met, they've been made redundant from a job, they've got that old family hot sauce recipe, and they decide, hey, I'm going to build this thing. And you know what the marketplace offers is just helping them to focus on the product and building a great product, building a great brand, while we take care of a lot of the other components, the picking, the packing, the shipping, teaching a lot of the what is needed. And I think what was exciting for me in returning to South Africa and returning to going to Cape Town is the potential for small businesses in South Africa, but also the rest of the continent, to be able to get online, get access to a much bigger customer base, learn how to tell your brand story online, learn how to access customers online. And I think the big kicker over time, as we build these thousands of sellers, as we call them, or small businesses, is the potential for them to, once they've learned and once they see market traction, is to then take that brand internationally. It's a lot easier then to get listed into .com, .co.uk, Germany, and any of the other stores across the world. So that's been our focus, but it's, for me personally, it's almost like a mission. I mean, this about me, is just the very, very excited about the potential of South Africa and Africa as a whole, as a continent. And as I say to the team, there's no reason why the next mega brand of the world shouldn't come from Africa. Because things are a little bit different. We do things a little bit differently. We are very scrappy down there. We hustle a lot. And again, if we can just unlock some of that energy and creativity, why shouldn't the next big brand be, a South African or an African brand? And that's what really, really gets me excited.
Talking of African brand, we talk of African bank. CEO, this is a bank that is celebrating 50 years this year. And it's a bank started by entrepreneurs. 50 Rand, I believe. They started the bank with $2, $2 or $3, 50 years ago. CEO, how have you built the financial ecosystem in the country supporting SMMEs in the grassroots level, given the mission and the vision of your founder?
No, thank you very much for that. So I mentioned this briefly at dinner last night, and it's probably a good place to start. That I often say that the original truth of things is not to be ignored, because it can unlock a lot of energy, and it can unlock the stuff you need to be successful. And in there is this nexus of what African Bank is about. Started by entrepreneurs, with serious odds against them. An entire might of colonial apartheid system over the time, over 350 years of muscle built against them. They had the audacity to envision a bank that would back them, that would support them as entrepreneurs from the periphery of the mainstream of the economy, to have a financial services partner that would walk the journey of their dreams, of their enterprises, of their aspirations with them. And that is why African Bank was established. It was entrepreneurs who were saying, we need a partner in banking for us to succeed here. We need someone who will not just look at us to receive our deposits and not bother to understand where they come from and what a additional capital we might need to start, to grow, to expand, and to go about the business of our business. So when we joined this bank about 5 years ago, we were inspired by this tale of the raison d'etre of the bank, and we sought to redirect its strategy beyond what it had become over the last 2.5 decades of being a microlender, really, but to go back to being true to this vision. And that's the strategy we've been on for the last 5 years. It's a strategy that's seen us aspire to grow from being a microlender to building a data and digitally enabled bank that is diversified, that is scalable, that is sustainable, and that can offer personal, business, and commercial banking. But within that, we're very clear that we were created to be a bank that addresses the middle and the bottom of the pyramid, both in personal and commercial banking, that is so hard for traditional players to succeed in. And we thought we would succeed in doing so by not only embracing data and digital technology faster, but also by creating alliances and ecosystems to enable us to really help this high failure rate in this market to be mitigated and to have a much better chance of succeeding. Because as a bank, we're a highly regulated entity. Our primary task is to get deposits from individuals, households, pensions, and we've got a primary responsibility to protect those depositors. And that's why we're so highly regulated. But we are at our best when we can then allocate those deposits, that capital, to areas of the economy where they'll be deployed productively and for good return, not just for our depositors, but for our other stakeholders. And so we jumped onto being an enabler of ecosystems for those selfish reasons, primarily risk mitigating in this middle and the bottom of the pyramid. Secondly, enabling us to learn and grow faster with that market, because we'll then be seen not just as lenders, but as players in the ecosystem itself. And then to ensure that we can deploy funding, both for working capital, for seed capital, for credit, for expansion, financing, on players that we understand and whose own development we understand. So this is a very selfish bank risk mitigating and yet enabler role that we play, that is in the sweet spot of our purpose and our mission. And so we really are honored to have partnered with 22 on Sloan in this regard, and we look to expand that partnership as we increase our own business into the middle and bottom of the pyramid. And so I was very happy when you nuanced our topic today to not just to be about startup ecosystems, but also SME ecosystems, because that's where we really think this extraordinary power of ecosystems need to be unleashed to make this work. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kennedy. I just want to say something, a round of applause on that. You made a very good point that you are not just lenders. You are partners. You have the developmental agenda. And one of the things we'll deal with today will be what makes an ecosystem successful. And if you've read the Global Startup Ecosystem Report, there are 5 key success factors The first one is performance. The second one is funding. The third one is market reach. The fourth one is talent. And then the fifth one is knowledge. I will come back to you now on the lending part, where you say you're not just a lender, you are also a developmental partner in the process. And personally, we can attest to that because we raised a few $1 million from African Bank, where our own bank couldn't give us that amount, and we had to raise it from African Bank. And I want to come to that to say, when you say developmental, you are not just lending money, you walk in the journey with the partner. On the continent where we don't have, SMEs don't have credit profile that meets certain traditional criteria and so on, how will you then address something like this in grassroots level, in our townships, in our rural area, to address that developmental part, while also looking at how you are governed and regulated?
So thank you very much for that question, Kizito. Before I answer it, can I just pivot to something Rob said earlier, which I really think is a big point. And if we forget why it's so important in a forum like this to be talking about South Africa and Africa, please remember what he said earlier. And it's about the role of Africa in this generation, and why it's important for solutions to come from them. Kizito, the UN predicts that we're sitting at about 7.6 billion people in the world today, and that by 2050 we'll be at about 9.8 billion. So it doesn't look like a big change, yeah? 7.6 to 9.8 billion. But if you double click on those numbers, the rest of the world, primarily Asia and Europe, will have declined as a proportion of the world population dramatically, including North America for that matter. And so the jump from the decline of about 1 billion to 9.8 billion will come from Africa. Because Africa has the youngest demographic in the world. And by 2050, not only will Africa have moved from about 1.1 billion people today to over 2.5 billion, over 60% of them will be young people. Now, that demographic boom is either a dividend, not just for Africa, but for the whole world, or a threat. Because you do not want 1.5 billion young people unemployed, in poverty, without opportunities, without hope. It's a risk to everyone in the world. I don't care how big the sea that separates you from the continent. So this is a generational mission here. It's a generational mission that will not be met by any large corporation. No large corporations have mastered the art of creating employment at the rate that is needed between now and 2050. It is small, medium enterprises, it's entrepreneurs that can actually meet this challenge. And so to develop a muscle, not just from the usual players in the private and the public sector, but also from banks like our own, to develop a muscle to support ecosystems that enable entrepreneurs to flourish, is actually a primary risk mitigant for our children and our children's children, not just in South Africa and Africa, but throughout the world. And so the word development that you've used has often been thrown about in dealing with, issues of almost handout and help and philanthropy. I'm suggesting that what is needed here as skill sets to enable ecosystems to be strengthened is actually going to be a survival thing for us. Because if you don't get entrepreneurs, if you don't get small, medium enterprises thriving and their failure rate reduced, get them to have access to funding, get them to have support such as an ecosystem gives you, then they will not be able to create employment, they will not be able to grow, the economy will not be able to grow. We will sit with a serious 1.5 billion young people all over the continent and all over the planet that no one knows what to do with them. And so we've been deliberate in investing in this muscle because the longevity of our own financial institution depends on these macroeconomic factors also working out.
Thank you very much. Rob, I'll come to you because we've talked of performance now, we've talked of funding. I want to come to market reach. Amazon, I think you said 60% of businesses at Amazon are small businesses, right? You started the program now in South Africa, supporting small businesses with products that are going on your platform, right? How do you see this panning out across the continent? I know currently you're only in South Africa, on the continent, with plans to expand across the continent. How do you see this working out for Amazon on the continent?
Yeah, I think, look, we're in 2 countries in the continent. We already have a store established in Egypt and a strong presence in Egypt, now South Africa. And that's purely from a retail, from a store's perspective. And, we're excited about the rest of the opportunity, but it's a long-term opportunity. We see, similar to what Kennedy mentioned, is just this change and this shift to, greater access to online, through satellite and through various other mechanisms, greater access to spending power. But again, there's a lot that we've got to figure out in the continent. And, lucky to work for an organization that allows a lot of experimentation. And we've done things differently in South Africa. You can't take that same blueprint that works in the US or any of these other countries. There's a lot that does work, but there's a lot that you need to shift and change. And so, we are, and I can give you some examples of those if you're interested, but I think just, again, it's a journey for us. We're early in this journey, but we're excited about the opportunity. And I think from a small business perspective, again, it's actually interesting. You listen to a lot of, when we talk about startups, the immediate thing that springs to mind is like a tech startup, growing to this multi-billion-dollar organization. But I think what is super important for South Africa and Africa is, we've got a big jobs deficit, and there are a lot of jobs to create, and small business is an excellent job creator. And if you look at the impact, I'll give you one story. There's a lady who, through tragic circumstances, she built this business that is creating these like little toys, but it's 2 hours north of Pretoria in a place called Makapanstad. No running water, very, very tough place to run a business. But the exciting thing is that she's employing 30 ladies from the community who are sewing like crazy and producing these products. How does she sell them? Does she hop in a taxi and get all the way to Pretoria? And, there's a lot of difficulty in that. And so being able to help a business like that, it's a business, it's not a social enterprise, it's a business, to be able to help her to get her products into the store, help teach her, basic things like barcodes. One of our biggest challenges in launching the store in South Africa is, explaining the reason why you need a UPC code, a barcode on your product, and, making sure that it's a legitimate barcode. That takes a lot of education. There's a lot of support that needs to be given. And that is essential if you're going to go and list your products in other countries and start growing your business, and the import income that comes from that. That's just a basic, simple step. Protecting your intellectual property with trademarks. I'd say most of the brands that we deal with, South African brands, don't have trademarks. How do I, what is the trademark? How do I go about this? It's expensive. And any of that kind of help and that education and the hand-holding, to start creating those good examples. I'll go on forever if you let me.
if I may, Kizito, if I may just... I mean, I'm quite excited to hear what Robert is saying there, because that's the key for us in terms of market access. To hear a major global enterprise like Amazon say that really helps. To your previous question around forms of funding, I really want us to go beyond the traditional forms of financing that look at a static balance sheet, that look at collateral, that looks at how many assets does an entrepreneur have, because the typical entrepreneur or SME that we're talking about here actually doesn't have that. And it doesn't help to just keep going back to the same question to get the same answer. Apparently that's a definition of madness, right? But what Rob is saying is absolutely key for me, because if he thinks like that and Amazon thinks like that, then we really can look at his supply chain management, look at the entrepreneurs and small businesses that they procure services and goods from, and provide innovative invoice financing, discount financing, purchase order financing, these being financing technologies that do not require, a look through to the enterprise and its asset base or collateral, right? We are moving with speed, and we launched in April our digital credit scoring and digital lending solution, which will be targeted at what we call the target market, or those entrepreneurs that require funding between 1 to 5 million rands, and look to use it and reduce costs of established funding mechanisms like project finance and structured finance that you do for established companies that do not want to use their balance sheet for you to lend through to them, but want you to zero in on the project at hand, or to zero in on how the funding and the flow of cash flow is structured. We do that. We do that as a matter of course, as corporate and investment bankers on established entities. We don't have to look through their balance sheet and through collateral. And with the advent of technology and how it reduces costs, we are working hard at fashioning those bespoke solutions for the medium and bottom of the pyramid. And we think that that will go beyond the issue of collateral, the issue of balance sheet, to look at the transaction itself and finance it on its merit. Of course, you do still need an enterprise that is registered, certified, structured, it's paying its taxes, it's not, it's legitimate. And that is where the power of ecosystems come in, because we think that those, call it administrative burdens of SMEs, they can call it outsource them or insource them via ecosystems as they focus on the business of their own business, and allow us as bankers to structure solutions around the transaction and not who their overall credit score is.
Thanks very much. I think we spoke about this yesterday regarding the SMEs in your marketplace that are manufacturing products on your platform. How do they raise funding from a potential partner like African Bank and other DFIs and so on, right?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, it talks to the power of the community. As we partner with other, whether it's financing, we don't do financing. That's not our, we're not the experts. So, but by bringing that community together, And, again, without a specific agenda, I'll give you just, if I could, one more example, because I think it brings to life some of the challenges in South Africa. But we run a skills center in Cape Town, which offers anybody can actually walk in and go and get cloud skills. And you can actually go and do cloud skills leading to certification. You can go and get your AWS certification for free. We do serve a lot of coffee to some homeless guys around there, but most of the attendees are, whether it's matric students, guys who are looking to make a change in career, but it's also some people who super, super smart, but just don't have the opportunity. And again, partnering with the community, other organizations, we actually, in this case, we partner with local government because, to get from Khayelitsha into the city, you'd think, okay, that's not a normal problem that any, in the US, we wouldn't think about that as a problem. Super easy. But in South Africa, that's a huge problem. I just don't have even capital to be able to get a taxi from A to B. And so partnering with local government, they now provide these vouchers so you can get to the education, or you can at least get to a job interview so that you can get going and then start earning a bit of an income. But there's some amazing stories. There's one young lady, again, from Khayelitsha, nothing, very little in asset value, went through her entire certification, and today she runs this little systems integrator business doing systems integration or deployments of AWS for a whole lot of larger enterprises, and actually starting to bid on RFPs and what have you. And it's those stories that I think, I personally, but also as an organization in South Africa, I think we play a really, really special role in being able to bring the community together. And one of the things that resonated to me and one of the discussions was, give first. You don't know how how it comes back, but I think that's certainly the ethos that we're focusing on of, building the skills is super critical to having a great, vibrant tech business in the country. Building small businesses is super important to bringing great selection to our customers in South Africa and to the rest of the world. By the way, there are already hundreds of sellers who are in these small businesses, South African brands, and they're selling their stuff on .com. There's one that is a coffee cleaning. They've developed this mechanism to clean, Nespressos and all those kind of things, and, standard coffee machines. Who would have thought it, from South Africa? Another one does cleaning of sneakers, and bringing those products here. But again, that's inspiration to that next generation of, entrepreneurs in South Africa. And again, it's not the fintech. Some of them have got some real cool tech products, and there is that component in our startup, on the AWS side. But to me, if we're going to get this right, it's at scale is getting these real micro businesses, the guys who are just starting out selling a whole lot of products, every month, every week. Those are the guys who are going to help. That's the platform from which we're going to build the greatness, the really big businesses of the future.
Thanks, Rob, for that. I think we've talked of, now that you're talking on skills, so we are number 4, right? I don't know if you remember. Number 1 was performance. Number 2 was funding. Number 3 was market reach, access to market. And Rob just kickstarted the skills element. Kennedy, I want to bring you in on the skills, right? I know African Bank, working in the grassroots level, communities and so on. You're doing a lot of skills development, supporting the micro enterprises that Rob is talking about. On the continent where we have so many young people unemployed, and Rob has just given an example of a young lady that went through this skills program and is now running her own systems integration business. How important is skills development on the continent, in our communities, but also for micro enterprises?
I really liked what the MC said last night. To quote him, not in verbatim, said something like, talent and creativity are universally shared. It's opportunities and resources that are not. And I find this every time in our communities in South Africa, and I've had the privilege of running banks across the continent of Africa. We and also running a bank in the UK. We don't have a shortage of talent, nor of creativity. Our young people are no less. What they lack is resources and opportunities. Our entrepreneurs lack resources and opportunities. The reason our estimated failure rate of SMEs in the continent is above 67%, which is higher than the average in the world, it's not because of of talent. It's not because of their ideas. It's not because of creativity. It's because of opportunity and resources. And the nexus wherein the four meet, where talent, creativity, ideas, resources, and opportunity meet, I call that the sweet spot of skills. And so we were very clear at African Bank that to be an enabler of this ecosystem, we needed to invest the people that we extend money to. We need to make sure that they've got the requisite skills to deliver on their creativity, their business ideas, the very thing that makes them special, that actually they've got skills to also deliver the stuff that is a qualifier for successful entrepreneurs, successful companies. And so with 22 on Sloan, we have put in money to support both in terms of once-off interventions, skills immersion for entrepreneurs through the different phases of their development and where they are. And then after that skills immersion, to then have appointed coaches that would walk the mile with them as they then go out of the classroom and the immersion experience to live through what they've learned and to see it demonstrated. There's a powerful Nguni saying that says, roughly translated, the road is learnt from those that have traversed it. And so you take coaches that have got hands-on experience as having been entrepreneurs themselves, as having run SMEs, to walk with these entrepreneurs through their journey. That is skills transfer. That is what reduces risk of default, reduces risk of failure, and in fact is what makes an ecosystem worthwhile.
Thanks very much, Kennedy. And I think you talked of it's not just ideas that is lacking, it's opportunity and resources. And the Africa Union Agenda 2063 actually made a mention that we need to rid our young people of the syndrome of always coming up with ideas with no significant achievement, with no resources, with no opportunities to actually activate that. We have 3 minutes left, but I want to engage the audience. So please, Africa's ecosystem, we've dealt with 4 issues. I think number 5 is knowledge, but knowledge deals more with research. But I want to use the remaining time for us to engage, but also for you to engage Kennedy and Rob. Any questions, clarifications, comments, contributions?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Iman, and I'm 21. I'm an MBA candidate here at Butler University in Indiana, but I'm originally from Cote d'Ivoire, and I'm also an entrepreneur. And so this whole discussion I really resonated with a lot of things that you guys talk about today. And my question is about, you talked about the lack of resources and all that. And my question is about how do you actually raise awareness on the actual resources that we already have, such as those actions that you are doing with Amazon and also the bank on small businesses, because I know that there's a stigma in Africa, at least from where I'm from in Ivory Coast, where people don't really trust banks, or they don't really think that they have opportunities to actually go to those banks. And as myself, running my own online clothing store for 3 years, I've been self-funding my business, and it really can slow the scaling of the business when you're doing it the hard way, I would say. And sometimes it's through the lack of, like, you don't really know that you actually can access those things. I'm educated, I have a bachelor degree from there, but still, I still face those challenges or apprehensions. So there's a big issue there as well. So what are the ways that we can actually change that or improve that?
Thank you very much. Let's take a few more. So Kennedy, I think, is talking of resources. How do we, yeah?
Hi guys, Paul Goodem with the UK government in the US, but was in South Africa previously as well. Thank you very much for your remarks, incredibly insightful. Two questions, if I may. One is just if you could elaborate a bit on the role you see of intra-Africa trade in all of this, and just relative to other regions that are much more integrated. And sort of linked to that, what you see as I agree with you, Kennedy, about the dividend and the threat of the youth demographic and creating jobs. What do you see around that challenge of job creation at a time where we're seeing increased industrialization, mechanization? How do we create the jobs at scale in Africa that we need? And if you've got any final thoughts on just the role of diaspora in all of that. You mentioned working in the UK. Rob, you were in the US for a long time. The role you see of the African diaspora. Thanks.
One more, and then we give to the panelists. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Olufunto Barofis. I'm from Nigeria, and I run a waste collection and recycling company. And the reason I mention that is because I interact with a lot of waste pickers and local young boys, especially, or young men, who are interested in starting their own business but don't have formal education and don't have a lot of access to some of these things we're talking about, which sometimes can come across as being elitist. So my question to everybody in the room, and I guess to the panel, is how do we start to solve for non-traditional youths who maybe are not educated formally and don't know the first thing about formalizing or starting a business in the way that we all know it to be? How do we support them? How do we allow them to start their own businesses and give them the support that they need? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rob, we'll start with you. We have 0 minutes, but I think they're going to give us 2 minutes. So we use 2 minutes to answer the 3 questions. Or you ask 3. 1, 3, 4. 4 questions.
Wow, 4 questions, 1 minute. Here we go. But thanks for the questions. Just I think, look, how do we make people more aware of these things? I think that Iman asked. I think the best thing that we can do, I think one of the challenges that I see, I've got a son in San Francisco who's part of the startup community, and you see the difference in, obviously there's a different access to capital and people and all those kind of things, but I think there's also there's a different way of thinking about starting a business and venturing. And we mentioned high failure rate. One of the things that was going through my mind as you were chatting about that is failure is part of innovation. And I think we need to be comfortable with failure. And we need to build that into our mechanisms. And I think you see this a lot in, especially in some of these real hubs around the world, the well-known hubs, is just, a lot of these guys are onto their, man, I've already screwed up 4 different ideas, they didn't work. But now I'm on to my fifth and my sixth and my seventh, and there's this huge confidence and belief of, hey, I'm learning every step I go. I'm going to make it in the next one. I'm going to get it right on the next one. And I think we've got to start demonstrating these are complex problems. I mean, the one on the waste management sounds super complex. We do have a lot of challenges that we have to address, and I don't think there are any silver bullets. But I think if we can just start small groups at a time, small sort of teams at a time, and I think it's also creating those role models, if you like. It's not really a role model, but just the confidence of, wow, I can actually do this, I can actually succeed, and they can kind of connect the dots. And they may not have the full understanding or the full resources. But what I also have seen in South Africa, Africa as a whole, is we seem to be trained in this mentality of, look, go and get a real degree. You've got to study insurance or engineering or be a doctor and all that. And that's what all our parents tell us. Fortunately, some of that is breaking down, but we don't celebrate the entrepreneur. Go and start a business. Go and do something, and that, I think we've got to change some of that mentality. And again, I think bringing these communities together where we can talk about entrepreneurialism and mix the young girl from Khayelitsha with the venture capitalist or the systems integrator or the, completely different types of people, and somewhere in that mashup, the confidence in that potential entrepreneur will exist. And I think confidence is going to be to me, it's one of the most powerful forces, obviously other than the practical, the capital and all those kind of things. But I think it's our responsibility as we build these communities is to help build that real belief. Entrepreneurs are optimists. You can't start a business if you think about all the things that could go wrong. You'll never start the business. You've got to be this incredible optimist. You've got to fail a few times, and you've got to just keep on going. And that's what Branson did. Most entrepreneurs have had many, many failures. We've got to teach the same in our communities.
He's taken all the 2 minutes.
You have 2 more.
Trust with banks. Cote d'Ivoire, well, we're going to have to open an African bank branch there now, eh? But, we all have to work harder at what Robert said. Raise the tempo on talking about entrepreneurship, and that it is actually the silver bullet to unemployment. It is the silver bullet to economic growth, development, to innovation, to creativity, all the things that we need to break out of where we are in the continent at this time, and no besmirching all the traditional professions. But geez, Rob is correct. We need to raise the volume on entrepreneurship, and that it's okay to fail. Just rise up again, and that's why a mantle of entrepreneurs. The diaspora, Paul. I really admire what the Irish Americans have done for Ireland. I really admire what the Chinese have done everywhere in the world for mainland, and the Indians have done for India. And I really think that we can do better as the diaspora in not just sending money home. It's amazing the amount of currency that goes into the continent every month. It's a significant part of the continental GDP. It's higher than anyone above the 8th largest GDP in the continent. Go check it. It's not enough. We need to start creating these diaspora ecosystems. You need to coach someone at Sartini. Need to coach someone at home in Cote d'Ivoire. Need to coach someone back home in terms of what a startup they can come up with, what ideas they have, and how we can support them. And part of the resource gap can be filled with just that. Successful mentors grow as much as they are mentees from that mentor-mentee relationship. And part of being deliberate about coaching someone in country is that it keeps you close to the opportunity wherever you are in the world as part of the diaspora. I honestly think that one of the things we've got to be clear about here is that when we speak, and this is part of the research we've just done with 22 on Sloan and other partners in our ecosystem in South Africa, to double click on the whole startup and SME segmentation. And what we found is that the biggest need is actually in what I would call the trader market, what you've referred to as that bottom rung, not sophisticated, no high technology, not high knowledge-based entrepreneurs who feel a need in their community. It might be selling on the street corner. It might be a spaza shop. I don't know what you call that in America. It doesn't need degrees and education. It doesn't need any of that. It needs a heart of an entrepreneur. And if we can master that trader market as part not only of a startup, but also of an SME ecosystem, I think we'll meet that challenge. Because, and to say this to Africans, it's like anathema. You don't need degrees to be a successful entrepreneur. You just need an ecosystem that works. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you, Kennedy. Kennedy, I just want to say Nigerians sent $20 billion home last year, just Nigeria alone. So, like
Kenya, it's a quarter of the Kenyan GDP. It's from diaspora.
Correct. So colleagues, everyone, friends, thank you very much for joining us. Let's give a round of applause to our two CEOs. And they're still around. Please feel free to engage them. And if you need any information on 22 on Sloan, also find us. We are here.